and you were scared to death of the circumstance. You messed up so bad, and mama said, wait till your daddy gets home. And you sat in your bedroom shaking for hours waiting for daddy to get home. I've been there. This is what the Israelites are facing right now. God listed their crimes, he listed their opportunities, and now they have to face their consequences. So chapter 5, Amos sings this song over them. He's still urging them to return. See, chapter 4 was all about, you never called on me and these bad things are going to happen. Chapter 5, he's calling to them. Please, please. So look at chapter 5, verses 2 and 3. It says, has fallen, she will rise, not rise again, the virgin Israel. She lies abandoned on her land. There is none to raise her up. For thus says the Lord Yahweh, the city which goes forth 1,000 strong will have 100 left. The one that goes forth 100 strong will have 10 left to the house of Israel. So when you think of a young virgin, here is a woman who has a lot of potential, right? She's young, she's unmarried, she's not ever known a man. Her life has not even begun. And yet God says, for Israel comparison to a virgin, her life's already over. All the potential is gone. She lies abandoned on her land. And the problem is that the land was God's gift to these people, and they didn't do what they should have done from the very beginning. You know that Gaza is still a problem today because the Israelites didn't kick the people out of Gaza a long time ago? That's where it all got started. The problem is, like I said, this was God's gift, but because of their unfaithfulness, Israel turned God's land into a place of death and burial. They used and abused what God had given them, and they had nothing to do with God. And they did everything based on what they wanted and how they wanted to do it. And because of that, God says, well, your future is cut off. You're like a young virgin who doesn't even get to see her 16th birthday. Look at the way he describes this. He says, the soldiers that used to go out 1,000 strong, when they come back, there will only be 100 left. And then when those 100 turn around and go back out, only 10 are going to come back. A 90% casualty rate. Isn't that amazing? And then the music changes a little bit. This funeral dirge kind of gives a little bit of up-tempo because God is going to give them another chance. Look at verse 4. For thus says Yahweh to the house of Israel, seek me that you may live. Do not seek Bethel. Do not go to Gilgal. Do not go over the border to Beersheba. For Gilgal will go into exile. Bethel will become evil. Seek Yahweh that you may live, lest he come mightily like a fire on house of Joseph, and it will consume with none to quench it for Bethel. This would make a great praise song. In fact, I'm going to get with Jeremy. We're going to put some lyrics to, or some music to it. Seek Yahweh that you may live. You could just say that again and again and again. And I'm not a big fan of praise songs. I'll be honest with you right now. You know, these repeating the same things over and over again. Sometimes I'm just not, I like the hymns. Okay, that's why I'm here at 8:30 on Sunday mornings. But this one I could like. Seek Yahweh that you may live. Seek Yahweh that you may live. What does it mean to seek God? What does that really mean? Well, first of all, it means change your thinking. Stop thinking wrongly about God. Stop thinking wrongly about sin. Stop thinking wrongly about life itself. Secondly, seeking God also means changing direction. It means turning around. It means going from the wrong direction to the right direction. Forsake sin, turn to God. It doesn't just mean crying out to God when trouble strikes. Oh, I'm in bad trouble. God, I need you right now. No, it means crying out to God all the time. Good times, bad times, just a regular day. Hey, God, it was a regular day today. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. It also means to despise the sins in our life and to seek fellowship with God. Well, there's a question. Why should we seek God? I'm going to give you 3 reasons. The first is to have life. Because disobedience means death. So seek God that you may have life. That's what he just said. Seek me and live. Secondly, we seek God because that's the way we receive spiritual blessing. What did God just tell the Israelites? Don't go to Bethel, don't go to Gilgal, don't go to Beersheba in search of blessings. What you find in those places is false worship. It's not the shrine that is the key. Jehovah Yahweh, I am the key. Seek me and live. And the third reason to seek God is because judgment is coming. Plain and simple. Chapters 1 and 2, he repeatedly said, I will bring fire upon. And you can go nation by nation. I will bring fire upon Damascus. I will bring fire upon Ammon. Okay? Right here, he said, lest God come like a fire. Remember, this book opens up with a foretelling of fiery judgment for the Gentile nations. Those Gentile nations had no written law of God. They didn't know God. They were not his chosen people. How much more then are the Jews who possessed God's holy law going to be punished? Fear of judgment may not be the highest motive for obeying God, but I believe that the Lord accepts it nonetheless. When I was 8 years old and I chose to follow God, a big part of that reason was because I didn't want to burn in hell. I understood that part of the message real clear right away. And I don't think there's anything wrong with preaching that today. Yes, as the Christian matures, he should grow into a relationship with Jesus Christ. But there's nothing wrong with fear being a first step, because the other side of that road is a very bad place to be. The difference between reward and punishment is something we teach our children at a very young age. God teaches us the same thing. My hope is that eventually, just like our children, hopefully, mature and develop higher motives for obedience, higher motives than just receiving a reward or not receiving a spanking or a punishment, that God's people, Israel, they never got to that higher level of obedience, is what the Bible tells us. That kind of obedience can only come from a heart that truly loves God. And by the way, Amos said, turn to God or burn, basically, right? I'm going to bring fire down upon all these nations. I will come on you like a fire. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you want to get to God, you got to go through me. And if you don't go through me, guess what? You're going to burn. It's pretty simple. I have no problem saying it just that way. And if fear of burning motivates you, well, good, because that's a good start. And then I'll tell you more about the love of Jesus that helps you beyond just not burning. My hope is that we would all mature into a relationship with the creator of the universe. So look at verse 7. Amos now says, for those who overturn justice into wormwood and put righteousness down to the earth. They overturned justice. I think that description is self-evident. They twisted, they perverted justice. Wormwood is an herb that is known for its bitter taste. So what the Israelites are doing is they're taking something that was potentially good and they were making it bad. And they were actually promoting injustice. And look at verse 8. He says, he who made the Pleiades, I never knew that's the way he pronounced it until I looked it up this week. The Pleiades and Orion, and overturns the shadow of death into morning, who also darkens day into night, who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out on the surface of the earth, Yahweh is his name. And in case you're unfamiliar, the Pleiades are also called the Seven Sisters. They're a cluster of stars in the northwest of the constellation of Taurus. We're probably familiar, most of us are probably familiar with Orion and with Taurus, the two constellations. At least you can find those three that form Orion's belt. Sometimes if you get way out in the country, it's one of the things I loved about working offshore was going up on the help deck at night and looking at the stars. So you can see the three that kind of make Orion's belt and all of that. But if you move to the northeast from Taurus, you encounter this little cluster of stars, and those are what are called the Pleiades. Now, I'm not going to get into the mythology that surrounds these stars, these constellations. I only have one point to make, and God already made that point. Who created them? The stars are a fantastic representation of God's creative power and his wisdom. So if anybody in here, and I don't know all of y'all intimately enough to know, but if anybody in here is into horoscope and astrology, I pray right now that you turn away from that stuff because it's bad stuff. Why would you worship the creation and not the creator? Why would you go after wood and stone and stars when the guy that gave you the wood, stone, and stars is waiting there with his arms open? The one who made the constellations turns darkness into dawn and days into night. And catch the next verse. Who calls the water of the sea and pours them out on the face of the earth. Yahweh is his name. There's a man named Bernard Palissy who is credited as the discoverer of the modern theory of the water cycle. The water cycle is that the water in the oceans evaporates and then it forms clouds and then it dumps on the land. He wrote his theory, by the way, in 1850 or 1580 AD. Notice God put it in his book way before that. It just took man a long time to find out that science is actually in the Bible. We could be here all night. I could show you all kinds of examples where God told the people, here's what I do. And then centuries later, man said, oh, you know what? This is what happens. God already gave them this. Verse 9 says also that he brings destruction on the strong and devastation on the stronghold. So he reminds them that he's in charge, that he created it all. And then he says, I can destroy it too. Verse 10 tells us a little bit about the Israelites. Look at verse 10. It says, they hate him who reproves in the gate. They abhor him who speaks with integrity. In other words, it really comes down to this. They don't want justice to take place. Anybody that speaks up with a standard, anybody who speaks up with integrity, anybody who actually speaks with conviction about somebody that's guilty is rejected. We don't want that. We don't want justice. And God says, because of your evil ways, even though you built fancy houses, you're not going to live in them. You'll never drink the wine from the lush vineyards you have planted. Look at verse 13. He says, therefore, at such a time, the one with insight keeps silent, for it is an evil time. Nobody will say anything because nobody would believe him anyway. So nobody wants to be that guy that stands up because he knows he's going to be slapped back down. The days are so evil that it's more wise to not say anything than it is to speak up. Verse 14, seek good and not evil in order that you may live. Seek good and not evil. It's almost like he has to tell us and not evil. I mean, don't we understand the difference? Seek good. But then look at verse 15. It says, hate evil and love good, and set justice at the gate. Perhaps, Yahweh, the God of hosts, may be gracious to the remnant of Joseph. Remember last week we touched on the remnant. It's like when the lion grabs the lamb and the shepherd grabs two legs and he pulls and the lion pulls and takes off with the rest of it and you got two legs. Or maybe he gets an ear. That's all the shepherd has left. But God says, for me, that's enough. I can take that remnant, that little bit, and I can grow a mighty nation out of it. Verse 16 is what I call the list of the wailings. There is wailing in the plazas. There is wailing in the streets. The farmer wails and mourns. Professional weepers wail. Wailing in all the vineyards. I mean, that's a lot of wailing going on. Why is there all of this wailing? And this is, if the rest of the chapter doesn't bother you a little bit, this should really shake you a little bit. Because verse 17, God says, because I will pass through the midst of you, says Yahweh. See, it just got really real when you read this statement. Do you really understand the impact of God passing through the midst of you? I will pass through you. Remember Exodus, Charlton Heston, all that stuff. God passed over the Israelites. He passed over them if they had lamb's blood on the doorposts, on the lintel of their houses. At the same time, God passed through Egypt. And when he passed through Egypt, he killed the firstborn in all the land of Egypt. Cattle, people, didn't matter. Firstborn. If that's for me, tell them I'll call him back in a minute. Now he tells them, I will pass through the midst of you. And these people have no lamb's blood. There is no lamb's blood to save them this time. Look at verse 18. It says, woe to you who are longing for the day of Yahweh. For what purpose will the day of Yahweh be to you? It will be darkness and not light. And this is kind of cool picture. It almost could be a good movie right here. As when a man flees from a lion and a bear meets him, or he goes home, leans his hand against the wall, and a snake bites him. Will not the day of Yahweh be darkness instead of light, even thick darkness with no brightness in it? The people of Israel were hoping that God was going to come back and vindicate them. They were hoping for military, political, economic restoration. That's not what the day of the Lord is all about. That's why it's also called, things like, all of them just left my head, but it's called things that are bad for Jacob, the time of Jacob's trouble, okay? If Jacob is going to receive military, political, and economic restoration, then why is he in trouble? God says you're not going to escape it. Imagine that you're out in the woods and you come face to face with a lion and somehow you escape that scenario and you go around behind a tree and there's a bear waiting for you. And somehow you miraculously escape from the bear. You get all the way home, you lock the door, you slam the door shut, you crawl into your little corner and you say, oh, thank goodness. You put your hand up and a snake bites you. You are not going to get away from this. There is no hope. You will not escape. Verse 21 says, I hate, God says, I reject your feasts, nor do I delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer up to me burnt offerings and your grain offerings, I will not accept them. I look at the peace offerings of your fatlings. Remove me from the tumult of your songs. I will not even listen to the melody of your harps. Do you think about God in terms that God can hate? The Bible says it right here. I'm not making these words up. He is just done with the fakeness of their religion. He's just had all that he can stand. Even burnt offerings and grain offerings mean nothing. Your hymns are just noise. Cut it out. Quit saying my name in the noise. You want to make noise? Make noise. Just leave me out of it. All I hear is lip service. I know what's in your hearts and where you would rather be instead of worshiping me. Verse 24, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. See, again, empty worship is just noise. It's just tumultuous. It's like a violent river. But God's justice is like a clean, pure, flowing stream that flows on forever and ever. Continue at verse 25. Did you present me with sacrifices and with grain offerings in the wilderness for 40 years, O house of Israel? You also carried along Sikkoth, your king, and Kion, your images, the star of your gods, which you made for yourselves. Therefore, I will make you go into exile beyond Damascus, says Yahweh, whose name is the God of hosts. Basically, God is saying, this is not a new problem, people. I got to make sure you understand this. You were in the wilderness for 40 years. And you came and you worshiped me and you praised me and you burnt offerings to me, and then you went home and you pulled out your little man-made statues and you worshiped them too. So who's it going to be? Is it me, or is it the wooden stone that you're hiding back in your tent when you leave the sanctuary, when you leave the tabernacle? Here's my response, God is saying. I'm going to send you into exile beyond Damascus. And if you remember that map that we looked at, Damascus is way up in the northeast. So they're going a long way away from their home. Remember a few minutes ago, we kind of highlighted, prepare to meet your God. And now God wraps all this up with Yahweh, whose name is the God of hosts, has spoken. There's your real mic drop moment. I'm done. Yahweh has spoken. That's it. And then look at chapter 6. Amos says, woe to those who are at ease in Zion, to those who feel secure in the mountain of Samaria. They were at ease, they were secure. They had their beach home, they had their mountain home, everything was great. Amos says, those who lay down on beds of ivory, they sprawl on their couches, they eat lambs from the flock, calves from the midst of the stall. They improvise to the sound of the harp, and like David, they've composed songs for themselves. They drink wine from sacrificial bowls while they anoint themselves with the first pick of the oils. But they don't grieve over the destruction of Joseph. He lists out their sins. He describes gluttony, heathen music. He talks about their drunkenness. All of that sounds like, well, that's just people being people. No, it's people not doing what they should be doing in their relationship to God. And then verse 8, he says, Lord Yahweh has sworn by himself. Yahweh, God of hosts, has declared, I abhor. By the way, that's another strong word for hate. So twice now he's told us things he hates. The lofty pride of Jacob. I abhor the lofty pride of Jacob. And here we go again. I hate his citadels. Therefore, I will deliver up the city as well as its fullness. City's going to be destroyed, and all that stuff y'all got, I'm going to take it out too. And in verse 14, he says, behold, I'm going to raise up a nation against you, O house of Israel, declares Yahweh, God of hosts. And they will press down on you from Lebo Hamath to the brook of Arabah. Basically, I don't know if you can see that map very well, but he's talking about from the far north to the far south. All of Israel is going to be wiped out by this, okay? The Assyrians are not going to come in and take a little piece. They're taking the whole nation. It's like New York to LA, okay? They're coming in and they're going to get it all. I think God gave them so many opportunities. And we look at it today and we say, well, what am I supposed to do with all of this? He said time and time again, seek me. When you seek me, you will have life. You will experience spiritual blessing. You will actually avoid judgment if you seek me. Seek me and live. Jeremiah 29:13 says this, if you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. I put an if on there, there's no if. You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. That's what he wants, is for us to seek him with all our heart. And when we do, we will find him. There is an alternative to seeking God. You know what the alternative is? We talked about why seek him. There is an alternative. You can seek God and live. So if you don't seek God and live, judgment. And I could leave it right there, and in fact, I started to. Because then we get to all go out here with our heads down going, wow, that was fun. But, I mean, that's basically the end of chapter 6. That's where I intended to stop. But since today is 9/11, and this popped me upside the head yesterday when I was finishing this up, I will leave you with verse 9:11. In that day, I will raise up the fallen booth of David and wall up its breaches, and I will raise up its ruins and rebuild it as in the ancient days. How cool is that that verse popped up on 9/11 to wrap this study up tonight, but I couldn't leave you, as Paul says, those who have no hope. Because even though the message of Amos, and especially the 6 chapters that we've read, is a dark message, a little bit non-hopeful, you might say, God always looks to restore his relationship with his people. And he even tells them, I'm going to come back and I'm going to restore you and the kingdom is going to be okay again, but it's going to be really ugly for a long time. He says, I am here to restore the fallen. That message is for you and me as much as it was for the people of Israel in this day. Now, next week, we got a little bit more bad news to go through for the people of Israel. I just wanted you to see that when we get to the very end, there's glory of God waiting. That's what I had for y'all tonight. So let me pray for us. Our Father, this is a hard book. There's no easy way to put it. It is hard, especially in today's times when we hear about a God that loves us, that cares for us, that always wants the best for us. And there are so many people preaching that message that ignore, well, what happens if we do not seek you? There are so many people that tell us about this gracious, loving, caring God that would never punish people, that would never harm his creation. And they don't realize that a holy, righteous God must. If you cannot even look upon sin, how can you allow sin? There has to come a time of Jacob's trouble. There has to come a day of the Lord, and it will be dark and it will be bad. But Father, I pray that we would learn from this, that we would take from this as we go, seek God and live. That we would seek you in every way, seek you by reading your word, seek you by praying to you, seek you by gathering with other people like we have tonight, seek you by talking to others and letting you share with us, because you said where two or more are there, you are there. I pray, Father, that you would show us and call us into seeking a relationship with you, one that even tonight can grow more special than it ever has before. Forgive us for when we think that we're the most important thing. Forgive us when we go chasing after idols that have nothing to do with worshiping you. Forgive us when we do not seek you. And this is my prayer tonight, Father, in the holy, powerful name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you all for being here tonight.